Are we all set?
No, I just.
Jamie, Hillary, you all set to go? Good. Okay, thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. This meeting of the Coventry Town Council will now come to order at 6:02 PM. Roll call. Ms. Ludwig?
Here.
Mrs. Shockley?
Here.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Here.
Mrs. Lima?
Here.
Mrs. Dickson? Here. May I have a motion to adjourn into executive session for the following? Closed pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 42465A2, session pertaining to litigation and in particular to consideration of a settlement proposal to resolve the following civil lawsuits. The list of lawsuits is quite lengthy. I have been advised that we're going to be discussing these in executive session. All the lawsuits are posted on the town website and on the Secretary of State website where we have our agenda posted. So all we really need to do tonight is just to read a summary of the cases that we're going to be discussing in executive session, and then we will also be bringing that forward into public session. So this is closed pursuant, as I said, 42465A2, Kevin Breene and WED Coventry 5, Kevin Breene and WED Coventry 5, Kevin Breene and WED Coventry 5, Kevin Breene, Charlene Randall and WED Coventry 6, Kevin Breene, Charlene Randall and WED Coventry 6, Kevin Breene, Charlene Randall and WED Coventry 6, Diane Morton, Steve Morton and WED Coventry 6, Diane Morton, Steve Morton and WED Coventry 6, Diane Morton, Stephen Morton and WED Coventry 6, Bodwin LLC and WED Coventry 6, Bodwin LLC and WED Coventry 6, LLC, and Kevin Breene and WED Coventry 2, LLC. We'll also be meeting in executive session, closed pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 42465A2, sessions pertaining to collective bargaining or litigation, specifically to discuss litigation strategy in the matter Soscia versus Town of Coventry, KC 2020-0769. May I have a motion to go into executive session?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Roll call. Miss Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickson? Yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. We will now adjourn into executive session. We'll resume in public session at approximately 7 PM this evening. All set? Okay, excellent. We will now resume in public session. Our town manager is on Zoom, so you can see, if you look at the monitor, you'll see he is with us this evening. May I have a motion to adjourn from executive session at 7:03?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Dickson, yes. 5 yeas, no nays, the motion passes. May I have a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc.
Yes.
Mrs. Dickson, yes. 5 yeas, no nays, the motion passes. The council met in executive session pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 42465A2 pertaining to litigation and in particular to consideration of a settlement proposal to resolve 12 civil lawsuits. These all have to do with real estate taxes relating to renewable energy facilities in Coventry. And the complete version is located at the Secretary of State's website where the agenda is posted. And it's also on our website where the full agenda is posted. And the discussion took place, a vote will take place in public session. The council also met in executive session pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 42465A2 pertaining to collective bargaining or litigation, specifically to discuss litigation strategy in the matter Soscia versus the Town of Coventry, KC 2020-0769. A discussion took place, no votes were taken. Agenda C1, Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Spearman, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and provide the emergency evacuation plan.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Thank you. Announcements. We are receiving applications for various boards and commissions, and we encourage interested community members to apply. A full listing of openings is on our website. On December 20th, 2021, we will start the Ad hoc Charter Review Commission. If we receive just a few more applicants, we can start the commission. Either way, on December 20th, we will start the commission or the ad hoc committee. Next, there will be a meeting of the town council on Monday, December 13th, and we will also have a meeting on Monday, December 20th. So do try to attend or participate via Zoom. We will be discussing at these meetings the school improvement project, COVID fund use, and a variety of other critical issues having to do with the success and vibrancy of our community. And also to remind you that Recreation Department will be sponsoring tree lighting at the beginning of December. And we announced that. And there's a very beautiful poster right outside the door announcing all of the activities for the tree lighting. Next, D1, affirming the purchase for the Department of Public Works 2022 Peterbilt roll-off truck, reference pages 5-9. Mr. McGee.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The last time that we had met, President Dickson had asked to put together some options what would happen if we did not purchase a roll-off truck to replace the one that was lost in the fatal fire back in September. I think you all have in your packets the options that we had presented. I know people would like to think that it's punishment to either the council members or to the taxpayers for not approving a higher budget. But I believe it would be ill-conceived to think that anybody could have anticipated the loss of these two pieces of equipment was coming up next, the backhoe fire and also this piece of equipment. It would not have been covered in any budget. It wasn't in our capital budget to replace these items. So these are unfortunate things that happen. It'd be no different than during a hurricane. If you lost your house and insurance didn't cover it all, I'm sure you wouldn't go sleep in the streets. You'd have to do whatever you had to do to make sure you had a house to live with. This is part of the infrastructure that we need to have for the transfer station and providing the residents of Coventry with the services that become expected. I'll entertain any questions or any further comments on the proposal to replace this vehicle.
Well, first of all, Mr. McGee, when you were here the last time, we did ask you to present some options to us. And thank you for the very detailed report. It has lots of data and information in it, and we appreciate the efforts that you made to present this to us and to the public also.
Thank you. I'd so add one more thing is that the company has called us. The truck is ready for delivery. It was ready. We put a build out hold on it. In the event that the council approved it, if they don't, they'll sell it outright. But they delayed it from last week's meeting to this week to get an answer for us after the meeting. So if we think we're going to do this later on, I can't guarantee that we're going to have a truck available. Again, they're just far and few in between, and they're building them to a build order. So that sometimes is taking anywhere from 6 months, 2 months to 6 months right now to get them built. One company, Mack Truck, won't have them ready until June.
So thank you for your report. I'm going to ask the town clerk to read the resolution on page 9, and then we will accept a motion, a second, and then we will open it up for more discussion by members of the council. Madam Clerk.
Be it resolved that the town council hereby affirms the award of a contract by the town manager pursuant to Article 10, Section 10.23 of the town charter for the award of a 2022 Peterbilt roll-off truck to Custom Truck Equipment Repair Solutions, LLC, 7906 Baseline Court, Tampa, Florida, in the amount of $166,069. This truck will replace the roll-off truck lost in the head-on accident. This award will be funded through the Rhode Island Interlocal Trust Insurance proceeds of $34,000, the transfer station account in the amount of $15,069, and $117,000 from the federal APRA funds.
Okay, may I have a motion for the resolution?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Discussion. Does any member of the council have any questions regarding this proposal? Ms. Ludwig.
So thank you. I read through all of the options here, and personally, there are a few options that I was not interested in pursuing. So just to give you an idea of where I'm thinking, option 2, replacing our truck, 16-year-old truck, with another used roll-off truck seems kind of silly based on the life of this vehicle. The option 5 to me, which is something that I mentioned actually, possibly not doing anything, not allowing anything, any additional funds. I don't think that that's the best option at this point either. I'm wondering if we might be able to consider kind of a hybrid of option 1 versus the resolution. So, for example, to keep the services, we would need some sort of truck, right? And so in the resolution, there's a request for the proceeds of $34,000, transfer station account of $15,000 and change, and $117 from federal APRA funds. I'd like to know if we can possibly consider taking a small part of the funds from contingency. I know that there's not a lot there, but can we consider taking a small part from contingency and the rest from the APRA funds rather than the full 117? And if we consider doing that, the 117 or 40, whatever we end up with, and I think this is a question for maybe Lisa or Director Mills or Town Manager Marchant, which APRA funds would these come out of? The the broader discussion where we're getting approximately 10 million, or would these come out of the 1.3 million that the motor vehicle tax was declined on to be sent to our town?
Yeah, the state withheld that. That's called lost revenue. So it's the APRA funds. So it's going to be based, the funds would come out of the lost revenue buckets. And that determination of what the total is at this point, I'm still calculating it, but it's at least 1.3 million. So I strongly suggest what Mr. McGee has presented. I think I know the COVID discussion hasn't been talked about in a lot of detail, but to use up a contingency fund, which is really low as it is, it started with a budget of 70 and I think it's down to 50. I don't really advise with that. I think we have enough lost revenue, and I do respect that you guys want to see, you town council, want to review the lost revenue and how it's going to be allocated. But due to the fact that we only have one other roll-off truck, and was it 30 years old? How old is that?
It's 22 years old.
Okay,
And
22 years old.
Backup truck.
And it is going to severely impact the services we provide to the taxpayers. I wouldn't go for a used vehicle, a used truck. I strongly advise how it's presented. I mean, I know you all are anxious to look at the COVID funds and allocate them in a certain way, but we are kind of under the gun with this roll-off and to provide the services we need for the taxpayers.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Shockley?
Hi. And this might go to Councillor Ludwig's question because I'm not positive, but I'm assuming this is CARES Act funds because we haven't so it's not necessary that we discuss the ARPA funds on the town meeting before we allocate them?
So this is not CARES fund. 100% of the CARES funds have already been allocated to the police.
What we have for revenues based on receiving those funds?
So to present in front of the taxpayers of how you want to spend most of the COVID money should be presented to the taxpayers. Yes, there is a lost revenue piece that could be spent in the general fund. So that's way different from the other pieces that are very restrictive.
Gotcha. That's what I think that was my question. I think
Yes.
you answered it perfectly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Two options that I didn't see presented. I had previously asked about potential cuts town-wide, and I threw out the police cameras because I know that they haven't been purchased yet, and I don't believe that we're required to purchase them this year. If we could actually allocate some of those funds, because I believe that was around $60-something thousand to this purchase. I don't think I ever got any clear answers on that one.
Yes, Mr. James, I believe that legislation has passed, and I'm not sure how much of that is going to be paid by the state. If they're going to mandate the cameras, are they going to pay a portion of it? And I think the representative that was here the other day made a point that he wasn't sure how much of the state is going to fund that.
If I might, so
Okay,
that legislation that you're referring to, are you saying that it's going to be required by June 30th of next year?
I don't know the requirements 100%. I don't know if the state has passed it being a requirement or just an option at this point.
But I guess since we don't know the answer to that, we
Right.
technically could allocate the police camera funds to this purchase for the time being.
Sure. I mean, it's roughly 40,000. And I do respect your thoughts on trying to get it out of the current budget. And we could take 40 here, 30 here. It's a pretty tight budget.
Understood.
If we take it, the piece from the cameras, where we're going to take the remainder.
I just threw out the cameras. It doesn't have to be the cameras. I mean, we have a very large budget that we haven't purchased some of the items. I'm just saying that there's probably funds in the budget, but I just didn't know if the discussion ahead.
So I did look at the budget
Okay.
after you said that. Okay, we have a $33 million budget from the municipal side alone. When you take out the debt and the bond debt and the pensions, we're down to 22 million to spend, of which 6 million is the police budget.
Understood.
So there is very little to look at and to take away from. I think we put together a very, very conservative budget last year. So I don't see any other means to take 117,000 from
Okay.
another line. I don't see
appreciate
it. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. And then my other option was that I didn't see here. I know the town council has approved various vehicle purchases this year. Have we received all of the vehicles that we have purchased?
No, we haven't. We're receiving the vac truck on Wednesday. It's already been built. It's being delivered and training is started on Wednesday.
Okay, there's other vehicles that we purchased.
There are others. There's the bucket truck that's coming. It's already been completed. It's being fitted out with the final pieces. We're expecting that in December. And the other pieces are being manufactured. The other 2 units are being manufactured, but they're smaller numbers.
Okay.
Our town manager has a comment to make, Mr. Marchant.
I appreciate the discussion and the effort to try to find another way to do this. I would be reluctant to move funds from one department into another department at this stage of the year because there's so much more of the budget year to complete. And we really have put forth the best solution for how to handle this particular situation because this was an unforeseen catastrophe that it really just puts us in the pinch. In the analysis that we did, I was encouraged to see that over the 24-year expected life of this vehicle, it makes the annual payment equivalent to about $7,000 a year, which is what we're almost paying on a monthly basis for the rental. So I think we'll have a really good return on this investment, and it is a prudent decision. It's responsible, and I really don't have a better way to fund it in the current budget.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Marchant. Any other members of the council with a comment?
The last comment that I just want to make on this topic.
Mr. LeBlanc.
I believe the last vehicle purchase was made, and I think we left $465 left in that budget line item for vehicle purchases. And I presumed that there was going to be an emergency vehicle purchase sometime in this fiscal year, and it happened the following month. My concern is we're already dipping into the APRA funds that aren't budgeted. And we have, how many more months left of this fiscal year? Several, I believe 7. So I don't know how many more emergency vehicle purchases we're going to have. And that's my biggest concern right now.
So I understand that. Mrs. Lima, do you have to comment?
I'll let Lisa respond first.
Well, I was going to say is right now we're going through the inventory of all these vehicles and or pieces of equipment, looking at the life, how many hours are used on each particular piece of equipment. This is something that hasn't been done in the past, and it's part of the long-term CIP project. And this, yes, it was an accident. Something happened that was kind of unpredictable, obviously. But with a proper long-term plan, this can be avoided. But this, we can't look back and the beginning of the year and try to foresee this. And we can't fix the CIP that's been broken for a long time overnight. So knowing all those variables, and I understand your concern about the APRA funds, and I wouldn't want to keep dipping into that until you all have a full review of the APRA funds. I totally agree with you on that. But this is an exception, and it is going to affect the taxpayers, whether with the transfer station can stay open. I think it's that serious. And we have a 23-year-old other roll-off. What happens if that breaks? So I think it's, to me, it's a pretty easy decision to go forward in this method. And we can certainly, look into these other vehicles and pieces of equipment and look to where, when you schedule them out, and as far as how many hours are used, how many hours are used in the life of the asset, for instance, the place I was at in the last municipality, we knew how many ambulances we had and we knew their life. So you kind of schedule that in over a 15, 20-year period. That hasn't been done here. So I think once we get all the information, and as part of the audit, I'm also going to inventory all our assets as well. So then we can have a really better understanding of where we can go from here.
Okay. I just want to mention that Ms. Mills is going to present a discussion on COVID funds December 20th, and we're going to have a public hearing on January 10th. So that is very close to this time. That will be our very next meeting. We'll have that discussion, but I understand your concern. Mrs. Lima,
I would prefer if we could wait until we discuss the APRA funds. This is kind of once in a lifetime money being dumped in our laps. And we also told the people of Coventry that we value and want their opinion on how it's spent. So to just spend it and do what we want with it feels a little empty to tell the public that we want their opinion on these funds and then to just use it however we want anyway. And my other concern is, say there's another accident that happens with another truck, we're going to be back in this same position again. And it sounds like we're going to have to keep making these difficult decisions, or this seems like the preferred option is buying new. So that's another concern I have that Lisa kind of touched upon a little bit, but I mean, I'd prefer if we don't vote on this tonight. And I know there's consequences because there's a truck that's reserved and what have you, but it just feels like an empty promise to voters that we want their input and we're giving them the option to hear about how to use these funds. And then we're just continuing to spend it anyway without their input. And there's just a limited amount of money and it's a unique opportunity. We have the option to continue the rental agreement as well for another month. So I'd be interested to hear about the consequences of waiting until after having that conversation with the public about the APRA funds and how they can be used and what they would like to see it used for. And folks are clamoring for ways to give us that feedback. So I'd be curious to hear from the rest of the council members if they would be okay doing that. We told these people we want their input and we're just spending the money without their input anyway. So I just wanted to hear what the other council members thought about that and hear from Mr. McGee, the consequences or the reaction or the action that would ensue by waiting.
public hearing is scheduled for January 10th, Mr. McGee, just to let you know.
Well, thank you very much. And I appreciate Councilwoman Lima's position. Again, if that was the case that you want to put this off, then we will lose the trucks been held for us. I can't make any decisions or promises on how long the transfer station would be able to be open. Once that auxiliary truck goes down with no backup, we are then in a situation where yard waste stops because we can't transport the boxes. Nobody will be able to come into the transfer station. It'll virtually be closed other than our people collecting bulk pickups that we
So
can
what
haul
is
with
the,
10.
oh, sorry.
We have 10-yard small hook lift containers that we use for the schools. We'd have to use those boxes to transport from our own people. I can't give you a date, but if that's a decision that you want to gamble on the services to the residents, then that's your decision. We'll live with it, do the best we can.
So what's the rental services doing at
It's
this time?
$6,700, and that's our primary piece that we're using. We have it right now rented till the 17th of December. And again, it's on a month-to-month basis after that. So we just keep eating into the partial deposit that we were to put to it. And if we go, it'll only bring us till about April if we want to use it all. And then we'll have that amount of money that if you decide to use the APRA funds, you'd have to add that additional money back into it because we won't have those funds to use for the purchase.
Okay. Discussion. Mrs. Shockley, comments?
And I wish there was a perfect outcome to this. I actually would like to hear from Ben first before I.
Okay. Mr. Marchand?
Thank you. I'd just like to provide some reassurance to the council that we are looking at any situation where we have destruction of town property on a case-by-case basis. And that we're not going to just assume that because any vehicle gets destroyed, that it's an automatic replacement with a new vehicle. That we're going to very carefully consider the relevance of the piece of equipment or vehicle to delivery of services and the risk to the community and the well-being of the citizens overall. So that said, I also want to acknowledge that with this 117,000 allocation from the APRA funds, that represents about 0.1% of the expected 10 million. And this isn't a frivolous want or something that is considered superficial or arbitrary. but this is a critical piece of our service delivery tools.
Thank you. Mrs. Shockley?
Yes, thank you. As I said, I also would have rather not already been going towards the ARPA funds. But I don't see this as a cost that isn't going to come up. So to try to keep it out of this year's budget, we are spending money on a rental that we could put towards a truck that we're going to be buying anyway. It also seems, I know we're talking about this resolution, but the last time we met, you were putting forth 2 new trucks, if I remember correctly. And now you're putting forth 1 and a used vehicle, which will fall within other costs.
Correct. The backhoe, yes.
So I do see from that, you have researched how to buy a used vehicle. The used vehicles, it seems, that are available for their age would be throwing good money after bad. It's a situation where we're not faced with any good or perfect outcomes. So while as I said, would rather not be looking into spending these funds, trickling them out without ever noticing where they went, I would like to see ways in which this sort of expense may have to be cut next year, though. We're putting a lot of money into public works this year. And that definitely has to be noticed when we look at next year's budget.
And I would like to note, many years, the money wasn't put into public works. And that's why we're at the position we are now to have things to be replaced. So you can only kick the can down the road so far before you have to start paying the piper.
Ms. Ludwig?
Respectfully.
So Councilor Lima, I think, asked for opinions on the council about waiting for the public session. I have had a handful of conversations with some residents about what we should be using COVID money for. And a general theme that I have noticed in those discussions is that people want things that will benefit everyone. And I know that that's hard because we have such a large town, a lot of mileage to cover. But I do believe the transfer station is something that residents in all 5 districts use. Considering the timing, I would be comfortable proceeding tonight. However, on the back of what you're saying about waiting, and I think Councilor LeBlanc also said something to the effect of how many times are we going to have to do this? I would request that we not have any other emergency purchases unless we have those next 2 sessions, the 20th of December and the 10th of January. So if something comes up in as emergency, we kind of know that until we have those sessions, we wouldn't be going forward on something, which they're coming up in the next couple of weeks.
It is never my intention to come to you for anything.
No, I don't think.
If it's an emergency, if it was a dump truck that got into an accident and we got totaled, we have enough redundancy that we could cover for that. But with a single piece that touches so much with the transfer station and the service that we provide.
Yes. And Director McGee, I don't think this was, a plan by you by any means. So, but I think it's close enough away that we have 2 sessions. This is on 2 agendas over the next, less than 6 weeks. And I would be comfortable moving forward tonight, personally.
Any other comments? Okay, first of all, thank you very much. You were asked to present options to us. You did do that. They're very, very clear, as I mentioned at the beginning of this agenda item. I'm not in favor of using funds that we haven't really had an in-depth discussion about, but I understand that this is an emergency and you've provided an opportunity to use some transfer station accounts and insurance into local trust insurance. So I'm in favor of approving this, but going forth, I do believe, as Ms. Ludwig mentioned, that we need to not have any more dipping into this particular fund until we have more conversations. And I will also note that of all the emails I get, almost, I would say 70% have to do with something to do with DPW, roads, potholes, water. It all has to do with them. And as Ms. Ludwig mentioned, what DPW does is touching every member of the community. So it's not just a little pocket here, a little pocket there. Every member of the community is some way affected by what we're doing for them, whether it's at the transfer station or how we maintain their roads. And so I think this is a worthwhile purchase for this evening.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Lima,
I want to bring back the question that I think was asked at a previous meeting with regard to emergency purchases. Where would we be paying for this out of if we didn't have APRA funds? What would happen?
Mr. Marchant?
I would say that that would leave the council considerably less options, and you would probably be looking at your fund balance reserves to cover unforeseen emergencies like this.
Of which, how much do we have in the fund balance right now?
Ms. Mills?
Ms. Mills?
So, I believe it's 22 million, 18 or to 22 million for just the school, for just the town. And the school's around 4 million.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? All right, we're ready.
So, yes, I have another question. So I'm just trying to understand how the car tax loss of revenue has turned into APRA funds. Can you just elaborate on that?
Sure.
With this 1.3 that you're talking about?
Sure. Under the U.S. Treasury regulations for how we can spend APRA funds, there's quite a few restrictions in this as far as the sewer, for water use, et cetera, et cetera. There is a provision for what's called lost revenue. So there is a formula and a calculation in different parts, and recreation will be a part of that, recreation lost revenue. It's revenue that you would receive pre-COVID versus what we received. And the state of Rhode Island held back 1.1 million of our motor vehicle revenue for themselves to use it as their COVID expenditures. So we lost 1.1 million. So that is an easy calculation there. There's other departments. We have some small loss revenue, including investment income. So those calculations all have to be made. And so that's the provision that you can use it. It's a very, there's not going to be a lot. I mean, it's over 1 million, obviously 1.1 is the motor vehicle, but in totality, this is the I guess the group of funds that you can use for general operating purposes. The other ones you cannot. So there is going to be a lot of discretion on how you want to use it because it is a smaller bucket, and compared to the 8 million, So, did I make that clear or no?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about how that's pretty much unrestricted. It's a lot of money that's just unrestricted that we could use on a lot of things. And we're making, we're chopping off a considerable part of it already without discussing plans, but.
It is. I do understand you're concerned, and I don't think, well, I can't guarantee anything, but this isn't going to be a repeat. I mean, this is a unique situation. It will affect the transfer station, and like Mr. McGee said, using the rental, continually to use a rental and throw that money away as opposed to putting a down payment on the vehicle is kind of lost money. So I know it's a tough decision. And so all I can say is I think it's the right decision. That's just.
Okay,
So you'd say this is the more economical than doing a rental until the end of FY22 and then
Yes.
budgeting for the vehicle outright in FY23?
Yes, because we're going to lose this. So we'll lose that whole 34,000 and we'll never get a return,
The insurance?
the insurance money. So we're going to
When
spend.
do we lose it?
Well, when we keep spending it, it's like
on spending
renting. Yeah, it's like renting as opposed to having a mortgage and you're putting that mortgage down and you own that house. It's the same thing. You're renting it and you're not going to have a piece of that vehicle or a piece of equipment. So I believe Ms. Kimberly said it's, this eventually has to be purchased. So if we're not going to use we're just kind of renting it and throwing that money away in theory, trying to make the right decision here. But I know it's a difficult decision and I certainly wouldn't go used because we already have an old one. It's unfortunate. In Coventry, we have a lot of things we have to make up for that maybe wasn't the best planning in the past. So that's where we are right now.
What percentage of our town uses the transfer station as opposed to trash pickup?
Once again, it's not instead of trash pickup. It's actually an additional service.
Yeah.
I can't give you a number because there's so many that come in there on a daily basis. Again, sometimes it's repeat, but it's people that come from all districts. And we're running at this time of year, especially people bringing in their own yard waste. We're running the entire 8 hours that we're open. There's people there. So I can't give you a count. I could give you a count in the future on how many dump passes we sell, but there's 4 dumps to that pass. So that would not count on how many times they're actually coming there. So whatever the count are for the number of passes sold times 4 would give you the amount of times.
Yeah. I mean, it's just when you say loss of transfer station service, I'm just trying to quantify in my head what does that impact tangibly? People
wouldn't be able to come to the transfer station.
No, I understand that, but how many, how much do people use it? And for example, if they got rid of the drop box on the side of the library, how many people would be affected that they couldn't drop their books in the slot instead?
That's a number I can't provide you tonight, ma'am.
Okay.
But going back to your other question about using the insurance proceeds, if we did that to pay for that, would only bring us to April, would not bring us to the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think to get a quantitative number, you can count the number of passes that
I'd have to find that out, yeah.
Yeah, passes, because I have a pass. I've got 2 punches on and I've got 2 more punches to go. But I mean, you get a pass and you can do it go in 4 times and that's it. And you have to get another pass.
And that's only partial, man, because there are things people can bring in, any recycle items, yard waste, they do not need passes for. So people are still coming in, but not needing the dump passes. So that's only going to give you a partial picture of how many people are using it. And the dump pass doesn't expire. So that 2 punches, it could be 2 years before Mr. Dickson decides to use it again. So it doesn't necessarily mean that's times 4 for that year.
What is a vehicle in the DPW fleet that if it got in an accident similar, we would be back having a discussion like this of a loss of service or something?
I would guarantee you we will not come back to talk to you about, even if I lost a dump truck, as indicated earlier, there's enough redundancy in that department with dump trucks that we would be able to make up the difference. None of those are frontline piece of equipment, with the exception of probably the 10-wheeler. And that's a newer vehicle that was just bought.
So if a plow gets hit this winter,
we'll find a way of getting around it. And won't come back to you.
That's a good New Year's resolution.
just because it's a great sentiment up here from the other counselors to say, before any other emergency purchases, but we're in this situation and here we are.
So can I add one more thing? So if you're really super uncomfortable with that, if you ran out the rental, the money, so which I don't advise it, but if you did and you got to the end of April, if you wanted to put it into the new budget and it gets financed in the new budget and we have 2 months to scramble to find, 2 months with no second roll off. I mean, that's an option, but I don't advise of it, and then there's also the supply and demand issue. I mean, there's not a lot of vehicles. I'm not sure if anyone's had any experience out there buying any used vehicles or anything. There's very limited inventory out there. So will there be one around when we do the new budget? But that's an option too. You can put it to the new budget, the FY23 budget, and finance it over 7 years. And you wait and you have 2 months with no roll off.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mills. It's time to wrap up this discussion because we have a long agenda. Ms. Ludwig, final comment?
So just to be clear for Councilor Lima, mine was not a sentiment. Mine will be a no vote if something is put before us again before January 10th. But it sounds like it won't. So I'm fine with that. One last question. So is the bike, the volunteer, the donated bike section, also bike bank? I'm sorry, I didn't remember the name. Is that also a part of the transfer station?
Yes, bike bank.
So that would also close down if we don't get a vehicle.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Are ready for the vote. This is to affirm the purchase for the DPW 2022 Peterbilt roll-off truck, reference page 5-9. The resolution is on page 9. Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Dickson, yes. 5 yeas, no nays, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
We're now on to item D2, affirming the purchase of a DPW of a used backhoe loader, reference pages 10 to 14. The resolution is on page 10. Madam Clerk, would you please read the resolution?
Be it resolved that the town council hereby affirms the the approval for the town managers pursuant to Article 10, Section 10.23 of the town charter to approve the purchase of a used backhoe loader from current listings in an amount not to exceed $56,180. This backhoe loader will replace the 2005 JCB backhoe loader lost in the fire on August 16, 2021. This purchase will be funded through the Rhode Island Interlocal Trust insurance proceeds of $31,180 and the scrap metal account in the amount of $25,000.
May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Any discussion? Mr. McGee?
Thank you, President Dickson. I heard your comments the last meeting that we don't always have to buy new. Yes, ideally you'd like to have new, but I heard you. That's why I'm presenting to you a list for a used vehicle. The backhoe is not a frontline piece of equipment, especially for the transfer station, but we have two backhoes for roads and bridges, and it's seriously diminished what we could do with only having one backhoe available. I had gotten a list back on August 16th of backhoes that were available. There was 12 of them. As of a week ago, 9 out of the 12 were already sold, and the other ones I wouldn't want to purchase anyway because they're too old. So I asked this resolution that before I start going out and looking for used backhoes again, that you allow the town manager the ability to approve any purchase not to exceed the $56,180, which we have the funds for. And then we'll start the search and put that backhoe back in where it belongs.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion by members of the council? Any other comments? Okay, ready for the vote. Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Dickson, yes. 5 yeas, no nays, the motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We're now on to agenda item G3, resolution affirming the award of purchase by the town manager for the sale of the Mapledale building to John Studley of 47 Indian Trail, Coventry, Rhode Island, in the amount of $60,000.
President Dickson?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to table this item. We are going to have a town asset and property session. I believe it's the 13th of December.
Correct.
Where we will review all properties in the town before we start selling off additional properties. And I've said in public session a few times earlier this year that before we continue selling off town property by onesie twosies, that we should have a strategy that the council discusses and approves for us on how to move forward with these properties. I have no issue with Mr. Studley. His business has done some great things. I've hired him in the past, so this is in no way a reflection of the person listed here. This is only on my request to have a town council discussion on town-owned properties first.
We have a motion on the floor to table item D3. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any other discussion?
You will call out that in the RFP for this building, it does say the town reserves the right to withdraw the sale of town property for any reason at any time up into including formal execution of the purchase and sale agreement. So
Thank you for that clarification in addition to this statement. We have a motion and a second to table item D3.
Under comments, ma'am, may I?
What?
Just that the town manager and myself have met with a real estate consultant for some of the town properties, and we will be meeting this coming week with him, and then we'll be able to have a report back for you to be able to utilize during your meeting.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to table this item. Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Ms. LeBlanc,
Mr. Yes.
You said miss.
no, I said Mr. Oh. Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Dickson, yes. Five yeas, no nays. The motion passes to table this agenda item. And as was mentioned, on December 13th on our agenda, we are going to have a discussion and overview of town property and learn a little bit more about the meeting that Mr. McGee had with Mr. Marchand and a real estate agent to look at our properties and to begin the discussion of how do we handle the properties that we have. Right now, I just want to reaffirm that we have not been selling property here and there. We have not sold any property, as I recall, for a very long period of time. We did vote to demolish one building, the Brian Reed building, but we have not sold any other properties. Some have been put out to bid, but we have not sold anything. So I just want to reaffirm that we have not done anything yet, but we want to not proceed with any kind of action until we've had a full discussion with the members of the council and also get some public input. So that would be on December 13th. Next agenda item, D4, resolution by the town council to request that the Coventry legislative delegation and the Rhode Island General Assembly provide a dedicated grant of funding to Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, specifically to commission an environmental study of Johnson's Pond for the public benefit and to aid Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management in the exercise of its enforcement and jurisdictional prerogatives concerning freshwater wetlands in and around Johnson's Pond. This is reference pages 16 to 17. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Discussion. Mr. D'Agostino, would you please give us a little background information on this?
Sure, Madam President. This resolution stemmed from a meeting with Dave Tropey of Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management that took place on Friday, November 19th. And during that discussion with DEM, Mr. Tropey had asked if the town had the funding to fund such a study, basically to conduct an environmental review that looked at wetlands as well as usage of Johnson's Pond. And in that discussion, that also included the town manager and the council president, it was explained to Mr. Tropey that the town's finances were not in the position that Mr. Tropey had thought they were. And Mr. Tropey indicated that DEM in the current state budget lacks the financial wherewithal to fund such a study, but indicated to us that he felt DEM could certainly, and DEM as well as the public could certainly benefit from having such a study. The study would essentially be a baseline study of environmental and wildlife and recreational uses and issues concerning Johnson's Pond and the wetlands there. So Mr. Tropey suggested that if the council were amenable to passing a resolution to request a specific grant of funding from the General Assembly to DEM to fund this study, that, that's something that would be helpful because DEM lacked the funding in the current budget. So that's really where this came from. And I'd be happy to address any other questions that you might have.
Okay. Mr. Marchand was also at that meeting with DEM. Mr. Marchand, do you have any comments?
No, Mr. D'Agostino has accurately reflected the meeting that we had.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions from members of the council? Ready for a vote?
No comments.
Comment. Ms. Ludwig.
Thank you. So I am deeply disturbed by the actions of Soscia Holdings LLC with the rising and lowering of the water levels of Johnson's Pond. And I think this is an absolutely necessary resolution for us to ask for help from our state legislature and from the General Assembly for funds to do this research. And it will aid the residents in getting the water levels to an appropriate and agreed upon level from the DEM side. Thank you.
Any other comments? This is a request by DEM for an environmental study, not only of the pond, but also of the downstream wetlands did not specify how many miles downstream the study should include, but does include some downstream work also. And this will be an environmental study. The president of Johnson's Pond has already solicited one estimate, one bid from a consultant. So we do have a figure in mind, and we have an idea of the kind of work that will be done, which has already been approved by DEM. So we're looking forward to having the support from the members of the General Assembly who represent us from Coventry. We have already notified each of the representatives and the senators that we are planning to follow through with this resolution, so they are well aware of our intentions. Any other questions? All right, let's have a vote. Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Dickson, yes, 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. The next item is Agenda E1, WED Settlement Agreement relating to WED tax appeal in the amount of $10,782.06 to landowners. This relates to the following 12 cases: KC 2017-0531, KC 2017-0532, KC 2017-0533, KC 2017-0534, KC 2017-0535, KC 2017-0306, KC 2019-0308, KC 2019-0309, KC 2020-0363, KD 2020-0364, KC 2020-0365, KC 2020-0366. This is reference pages 18 to 20. May I have a motion?
Make a motion.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Could you just give some
Maybe we can have
information?
Ben give us something. Yes.
Mr. Marchant?
Yes, thank you. So these lawsuits arose out of a number of tax appeals for property owners that have wind turbines located on their property. And they objected to the method and manner by which the town had been assessing properties, which for a 3-year period, it was the 2 acres around the wind turbine. And in this settlement, we're proposing to narrow the scope of the developed land to be 1 acre per turbine, leaving the other acre to be assessed at the lower rate of open space. The reason we're in this situation is because there is no precedent. All the legislation and taxation policies are new, and there aren't any guidelines promulgated by the state at this time to determine exactly how these should be treated. But in our research, we found that throughout the state, there is a consensus converging around a 1 acre per wind turbine as the basis for taxing the developed land.
Thank you, Mr. Marchant. Mr. LeBlanc?
Can we just discuss where this is going to be funded out of?
Yes, absolutely. Would you like to offer an amendment?
A discussion first on, I believe the options were 2 options, Mr. Marchant. I just wanted it to be a public discussion.
So
Yes.
I had suggested that we could, since this is an unanticipated legal settlement that we did not budget for, we could take it from our budgeted line item for legal fees, or we could take it from contingency. I have not had an opportunity to discuss it with Finance Director Mills to see if she had any ideas where she would prefer to see it taken from. But contingency seems like an appropriate place.
Thank you. Ms. Mills, your comments about using contingency fund for $10,782.06.
So I'm fine with Mr. Marchant's answer. I mean, or we can put it in legal. I think there is room for both. So it's to your discretion.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Mrs. Lima?
Ms. Mills, can you just confirm what the current balance of contingency is? And I think you said something
believe it's-
earlier about 50.
Yeah, I don't have it right with me. Actually, I don't believe I have it with me. I believe it's 50.
Yeah, so I might prefer the legal line, just because that if we took it out of contingency, then we'd be left in with less than 40K in contingency for 7 or 8 months left in the fiscal year, or I guess 7 now. So, and that money we can use in other capacities, whereas legal, that's specifically what it's used for. Unless Mr. Marchand or Ms. Mills anticipate that we're going to go over on legal.
I don't believe so. I mean, when I did the budget, the budget for legal was one line. And so
Yeah,
I
it's
actually,
one
yeah. So I'm in the process for FY22. I have actually broken it out on the general ledger to break it out between labor attorneys, solicitor, special projects, and also contingent lawsuits. So I believe we'll be comfortable there in the legal side.
Okay,
So
thank you.
my-
So may I have an amendment?
I want to hear the opinion of other council members, but my preference would be to take it out of the legal line. And I'll make an amendment as appropriate.
Okay, other comments? Mrs. Shockley?
I agree with Mrs. Lima, taking it from legal when it sounds like in the future we'll have a contingency line for legal anyway, instead of from a contingency fund and giving ourselves less options there. I think that makes perfect sense if it's a viable option on finances side.
Okay, Mr. LeBlanc, your opinion?
I appreciate the discussion and I agree with legal.
Okay, Ms. Ludwig?
That seems fine. Do we have to put it in
Yes,
the settlement agreement itself, or can we just direct you from that location to take the funds?
we'll ask Mr. D'Agostino.
If you make it part of your motion, it's just a directive by the council to where to get the funds. So it doesn't have to be incorporated into the settlement agreement document, if that's what you were referring
We're
to.
asking about the adding an amendment to the motion.
Yeah.
No?
So I think it would be just as you would speak resolution.
That's correct. Yes.
So the agenda item would be the motion to approve the WED settlement agreement relating to the WED tax appeal in the amount of $10,782.06 to landowners for each of 12 cases, with monies coming from the legal line item. Is that correct? Okay. All right. So we'll take a motion on that with the addition of the legal line item being used. May I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickson, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Thank you.
Well, now that you declared an amended motion, we have to vote as a whole, don't we?
He just said that we could just add it, not do an amendment.
Oh, because we had already done a motion in a second and we never voted on that. So,
You had, but the same people who moved the original motion as well as the second motion. So you don't need to revisit it. You've acted. It's conclusive. I think we all
all right.
understand.
Yeah,
what was
no, I
approved.
understand, but we just did a duplicative motion in a second, but
Yes.
all right, fine.
If someone had offered an amendment, then we would have proceeded the way you're suggesting, Mrs. Lima. Thank you for your comment. Okay, the next item is Agenda E2, Tax Assessors Additions and Abatements for October 2021 and November 2021, reference pages 21 to 29. The resolution is on page 29. Mr. Marchand, Ms. Martini is not here this evening. She was called away, so could you please speak to any item on the report that she has?
Certainly. So what you have before you is the adjustments to taxes that have been over or undercharged. This report comes out every quarter as clarifications come in. Sometimes people are getting taxed for a motor vehicle they no longer own, so we have to back that off of their taxes. In other cases, they purchased a property and those taxes went to the prior property owner, but now they're coming to the new person. And so this is just housekeeping. Quarterly, we update these tax rolls and you have the adjustments before you.
Thank you. Are there any questions that any members of the council would like to ask? Well, before I do that, may I have a motion to approve this report?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, discussion. Ms. Ludwig.
I just had one question. It's on page 27 of 29 of the packet, and it's on the first page of abatements. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th and 6th line down. I noticed there's 2 land adjustments here for the same company at 2 different addresses, and one of them is larger than we're used to seeing at 9,000 and change. Do you see which one I'm referencing?
Yes, I do.
I'm just curious the background on this particular item.
I would have to look into that. I don't know the background on this. I don't
either.
I suspect, I know she had an issue with one particular, I don't know if this is the land, but it's in there, the lots are the same, close together. I don't think they were properly in the system, but I would have to ask Carrie for sure. I don't have a full, complete answer for you. Sorry about that.
Okay, maybe we can get that offline. It's not an impediment to my vote tonight.
Okay, any other questions that members of the council have about this report? Okay. So may I have a motion, be it resolved that additional tax abatements and additions for October through November 2021 be thereby approved by the Coventry Town Council. May I have a motion? That's right, we already did it, Kim. And okay, thank you. Okay. Vote. Ready for the vote. Mrs. Shockley.
Yes.
Mrs. Lima.
Yes.
Ms. Ludwig.
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc.
Yes.
Mrs. Dickson. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. We're now on item E3. Further discussion on strategic planning session from November 13th. For members of the public, the town council, the manager, and department directors had a strategic planning public session on Saturday, November 13th, 2021, from 8 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. During the session, the town manager presented feedback he had from staff concerning mission, vision, and values for the town of Coventry and strategic needs. Each department director presented a PowerPoint presentation, which is on the Coventry, Rhode Island.org website. The meeting did not reach consensus on mission, vision, values, and strategic needs. It was an awareness discussion. We didn't get as far as we had hoped to, but it was a very informative discussion because the department had put a lot of time and effort into preparing a very complete presentation, and some of them are here this evening. So thank you all for your presentations. I'd like to start with Mr. Marchand to continue the discussion on the strategic goals. Mr. Marchand sent an email to each of the members of the council. They have a copy of it here with what he has considered to be some potential tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 strategic goals. And also he has presented each of us a copy of his original introduction during the strategic planning session. So we'll let Mr. Marchand continue on with his suggestions for strategic goals. Mr. Marchand.
Thank you, Madam President. So my intent really tonight was to allow for the discussion that the town council was unable to get to at our last strategic planning meeting. I do want to note, however, that we have also scheduled time on December 13th for a further continuation of this conversation, should you need more time or request more information. with the intent of facilitating the conversation, I sent 2 documents last week with kind of parameters around the items that had been discussed and their level of priority and kind of what category they fall into. And certainly at this stage, none of the documents are conclusive. I'm seeking your input and direction of anything you would like to include or add to them. Or take off, as the case may be.
Okay, so what we're going to do is look at the tier 1. We'll start off with the tier 1 items that Mr. Marchant had us on his list. I'll just read you the category name. A town financial operating system, town hall rehabilitation, parks and recreation maintenance garage, the sewer program, and tax abatement / tax freeze policy. Those are the tier 1 items. So we'll start off with those, and then we can go down to the tier 2 and tier 3 items. So I'm opening this discussion to members of the council. Is there any comment that you have about any of the items that are on tier 1 or any other items that you would like to add to tier 1? And because this is going to be a very lengthy discussion, I'm going to ask each council person to make one comment. We'll go down the line. Everyone will get a chance to make a comment, make an addition or subtraction, et cetera. And then we'll go back down the line again. So everyone will have a fair chance to speak as often as they want. So we'll start with Ms. Ludwig, our Vice President.
Thank you. So some of the items that are posed in tier 1, I think these are going to be difficult items for us to prioritize over other public requests. So I'll give you one example. So town hall rehabilitation. I think we're going to need to hear more about that. We very briefly touched on this at the session we had about some concerns that were noted. But when I look at the list of other items that have been suggested for tier 2 and tier 3, frankly, I think a longer term capital improvement plan is absolutely necessary. And so I know there's only so many things that we can deem as tier 1, but there's a few other items listed in tier 2 and 3 that I think, in my personal opinion, should be in tier 1. Also, because we have not decided the outcome of the school bond proposals that we'll look at on the 13th of December, the school facilities strategy is another item that sticks out to me as possibly needing to go into tier 1 if that does not pass to go to the voters.
Okay, thank you. And what I have for a long-term strategic goal is to ensure the long-term financial stability of the town of Coventry. I think that we've had a good, thorough session on the financial health of the community. And I think to ensure the long-term financial stability is extremely important. That would mean that we would look at conserving energy, increasing revenue sources, et cetera. But that is a high-level strategic goal. Obviously, it needs some tactical action items associated with it. And some of these on tier 1 and 2, I think possibly could be considered tactical measures to reach that goal. But financial stability seems to be what is most important to us at this point in time. I'll now ask other members of the council for their opinions, and we'll go back and forth across the line. So I'm offering ensure long-term financial stability as a tier 1 objective. Mrs. Shockley.
Thank you. I agree that the school facility strategy being a tier 3 isn't appropriate for the need of those facilities. I would say for Parks and Rec, some of these things I can't speak to. So possibly the maintenance garage is a tier 1 expenditure, but I see revenue generating ventures as tier 4. And, whenever something could generate revenue, I would like to see that higher up. Some of these things I know we are currently working on, but I'd also just like to speak to the performance audit and the fact that we're in the process of working on that. And I think the outcome of that report could help us to determine from an outside source needs in some of these areas. Staffing comes to mind. And even the town facility strategy and things like that, along with the school facility strategy, if we want to start speaking of those together. So I'd really like to see the performance audit as we move forward on our strategic plan.
Thank you. Mrs. Lima.
Thank you. I'll echo some of the sentiments of my colleagues. I definitely echo the sentiment from Ms. Ludwig on town hall rehabilitation. I think that'll be a tough sell. While I do see the need, and I've brought up, I understand the issues with safety and also privacy of information and usability and productivity. My other piece is I need a little bit more information on the maintenance garage that merits it to be a tier 1 priority. I like the sewer program being addressed up top because it is the enterprise fund is in considerable debt. I think tackling that is important. And I would agree that we need to move up some other items like the school facility strategy and CIP. And also any of these pieces in the other tiers that are low hanging fruit that can generate revenue or ROI, like maybe mentioned in Parks and Recreation down in tier 4, or, materials management center wouldn't be something that's low hanging fruit or low cost, but does have a potential for ROI. And I think there are some things that could probably be pulled together, like the electronic services or being able to do some government services online instead of having to come in, having that as an additional option to the in-person format with a new website, I think is really important and could also lend itself to issues with staffing in the meantime as well. So those are just some of my quick thoughts. And I do agree with Councilmember Shockley on making sure that we tie in the results of the performance audit with this, which is, I'm sure, going to go hand in hand with how we make decisions and prioritize this. And I'd also be curious to know and prioritize some of these projects based on what the COVID funds can be used for. Can the COVID funds help with any of these? And I think that would move these up a couple tiers because I think we're probably under the gun to use those funds to a certain extent. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. LeBlanc.
I would like to see town facility strategy, school facility strategy, and road infrastructure move from tier 2 to tier 1. Specifically because for 4 years before I was on council, I would always ask, where's our 3 or 5 or 7 or 10-year plan for this town? And I would always get the exact same answer. We don't even have a 1-year plan. And I think moving those from tier 2 to tier 1 and actually coming up with a 3, 5, 10-year plan would solve a lot of our emergency purchases and all of our equipment getting old and our buildings falling down. So I'd like to start there. And then sewer program, I believe a focus on economic development and the benefits of the sewer program for that versus going into residential areas and mandating astronomical assessments needs to be discussed and it needs to be our priority.
Thank you. Ms. Ludwig, we'll start with you again. Any other comments?
Maybe a question for Councilor LeBlanc. Do you see things like road infrastructure and school infrastructure reviews on that different than a capital improvement plan?
It's all in the same.
Okay, because I think we could possibly bundle a few of these that are talking about similar strategies when it comes to roads, capital improvement items that are one-time purchases for the town, those types of things. So if there's an opportunity to bundle a few of these items together under one common goal, I would be interested in that as well.
I was going to suggest stabilizing and improve the infrastructure of the town's physical assets, including its schools, to provide a safe, healthy environment for interaction. So that tends to bundle many of those things. I'm looking at sort of a higher level right now. Some of the things that I presented, like ensure the long-term financial stability. To me, that is a goal that we have to work on. It's probably going to take 2 to 3 years or so, but we need to consider some of the things that actually are in tier 1, 2, and 3 are actually almost like tactical goals to try to reach that particular goal. But financial stability is, to me, key right now in all the decisions that we are making. So I would also offer, as I said, stabilize and improve the infrastructure of the town's physical assets, including its schools, to provide a safe, healthy environment for interactions. Okay, Mrs. Shockley, another idea from you.
Yes, thank you. I would like to see, possibly at our next meeting, which of these items would be covered under the American Rescue Plan Act funds as we look to move forward. I believe Mr. Marchant said, and I agree, let's start with what we are looking to do in the town and then see how those funds fit in. But I think it would be a good way to kind of see what does fall under that money that we have available to spend.
Okay, Mrs. Lima.
If possible, in whatever version of the revised tiering based on the commentary here, I'd like to see if there's some cost estimates. You know, what's the cost for migrating to a new financial operating system? What are the costs associated if the Parks and Rec garage stays in tier one? What are the costs associated with that, or how big of a project does that look like? And some of the other ones that might have been mentioned, that are more tangible like that and not strategic. I'd just be curious to know some ballpark pricing so we can think about that as we plan for the next fiscal year.
Thank you. Mr. LeBlanc.
I have no more comments.
I'm sure you do. We'll come back. Mrs. Shockley.
Just one more thing quickly is I know that some of these are things that we're already starting to work on, look into, either looking into what they would cost in dollars going out, or a decrease in dollars spent, or an increase in dollars coming in. So anything that we're currently putting efforts into, I'd like to see that too. I think it would be helpful to know, like, website, it's something that we're working on. This is where we are. These are the expected costs. So going off what Ms. Lima said, kind of putting some dollars next to these things as opposed to just tiering them, because things might fall into a different tier if it's something attainable.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ludwig.
I just wanted to revisit one of the points I think President Dickson, you might have made about some of these items may be considered a bit more tactical than an overhead goal. So for example, communications, there's a few items under here in terms of electronic services, website, et cetera. So to me, it feels like we need to take this up a level and say, what is the expectation from the town council? Something to the effect of, we want all digital services in the next 3 years. And then some of these items would fall under it: a new town website, credit card payment, kiosk, et cetera. So I'm wondering if, at least for just tier one, we could come up with, I don't know the magic number, but whenever we do more than 5 goals, it seems unattainable realistically. If we could do something like 5 overhead goals and figure out what fits under there, that feels more in line with what I was expecting.
Thank you. When I was looking at the list, I felt the same way that you do. So I came up with a strategic goal: ensure ease of access and organization of town documents and records, resident requests and comments. And that underneath that would fall electronic services, which on the list here, for those of you in the public, it's moving the town toward an all digital virtual platform for government services, self-serve website, kiosk, receive/process electronic payments, paperless reports, tasks, agendas, forms, et cetera. That would be one of the, I would say, tactical, although it's pretty high level, take quite a bit of time, but that would be one of the things that would help ensure ease of access and organization of town documents for all the people. I mean, I think that we're in the business of providing services and benefits to the members of the community. And we have to consider what are their needs and what is going to be the easiest way by which they can access these benefits and services that we offer. And if we can digitize some of these materials that we have, if we can somehow do other kinds of things improve the website, etc. This will ease access and organization of the town documents for all members of the community, and plus businesses who come in looking for deeds, etc. So I think that that would be a worthy consideration. All right, Mrs. Shockley, we'll go down the line again. Other comments?
I have no further comments at this time.
Okay. Mr. Marchant.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments to some of the things I've heard. I think you're on exactly the right track. And if I have a regret, was that I created tiers 1, 2, 3, and 4 because they were not meant to be ordinal. It was really meant to be the descriptions next to them. I was trying to just lump things into categories of, different types. So however you want to reorganize them, I think is fantastic. From a strategic planning perspective, I really appreciate the guidance that I'm hearing for the vision for the next 3 to 5 years, because a lot of these projects are not going to be financially attainable in the next 6 months or a year. What I know about staff is we don't let grass grow under our feet. They're already moving as much as they can on any of these items that are going to be especially helpful and valuable to the operations of the individual departments. But that said, what the council wants and what the community wants in the next 5 years can be budgeted for in the future, even without consideration and now. So for the purposes of tonight's discussion, I appreciate you doing the best you can with the limited information that we have. We'll do our best to get you more financial numbers, and perhaps on the 13th, if we call out a few of the items, like I've heard, particularly the Parks and Rec garage, as well as the Resources Materials Center or the Town Hall rehabilitation, we can put some speculative numbers to those to round out the discussion.
Would it be helpful if we had members of the council maybe get a spreadsheet and just indicate what would be their top 5 based on what they heard this evening and what we have on the list, and provide that to you?
Yes, of course, that would be helpful.
Okay. Is that agreeable? Well, we have the meeting minutes recorded, so we can do that. So what we can do is we can get maybe, Madam Clerk, could you get the meeting minutes for this one transcribed as soon as possible? And then send it to me, and then I will just compile that list that's in the meeting minutes and send it, or Mr. Marchand could send it off to members of the council for some kind of rating based on what they consider to be the top 5 strategic elements. Would that work? Okay. Would that work for each of you? And then he will have that by the 13th, when we're going to have this discussion again.
And this is, President Dickson,
Yes.
this is just a preliminary list, right?
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
like, I believe it was Councilor Lima mentioned, I don't know about some of the items in here as well. So I'd want to hear more about them.
Absolutely. And so what we can do is you could maybe put down your top 5, and then you could also say on this list, I'll put a couple of questions. What other projects or strategic goals on this list or that you heard about tonight do you want to know more information about? What does it actually mean? And then those can be fleshed out. That makes sense? Okay. We are now on agenda item E4. Discussion and possible action.
Madam President,
I'm sorry, yes.
I was just going to ask before you go on,
Yes.
if the council had any comments on the mission statement or vision, if they want to speak to that now or save that for the next meeting.
Okay, the second handout you received this evening was the introduction that Mr. Marchand provided to us at the strategic planning session. He provided a draft of a mission statement, vision, and core values. I'll read the mission statement so that members of the public can hear it. The Town of Coventry mission is to provide the highest quality municipal service to its residents, businesses, and visitors in the most effective, economic, and efficient manner as set forth by the Town Council. So mission is basically what's the business you're in? And our business is the business of government to provide service and benefits to residents, and it's called out residents, businesses, and visitors. And the question is, how do we provide this service? How do we provide this benefit? And it says in the most effective, economic, and efficient manner as set forth by the town council. So that indicates that this is how we're going to do it, and this is who's going to do it. Okay, so there are several pieces to this mission. What is the business that we're in? Who are our customers? To whom do we provide this product or service? How do we do it? And who's going to be responsible for it? The vision is the town of Coventry will prosper as a safe, healthy, economic, and enjoyable community that offers the best value for our residents. And the vision statement is really a look at the future. How do we see ourselves down the road? What do we look like, say, 5 years from now, or maybe 10 years from now, or maybe even 3 years from now? So what's our vision for the future? What does the future look like? So the mission is, what are we doing now? And the vision is, where do we want to go? And then the core values. Mr. Marchand, please tell us a little bit about how you were able to develop this list of core values and organizational values.
So the core values were developed through input gathering from the employees. We did an employee survey and asked employees to give input on the values that are most important to them in determining the future health and success of the organization. We took input from the management team, and we also discussed it, and I took notes of the council members' comments at the strategic planning meeting. And all these were kind of pulled together as kind of seeming the most representative of that input.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll open up for discussion. Comments about the mission statement. We'll go down the line. We started with Ms. Ludwig for strategic planning, so we'll start with Mr. LeBlanc this time. Comments on mission, vision, or core values. Mr. LeBlanc.
I mean, I actually like the mission and the vision and the core values. I do know that I believe, Ben, you had a mission, but you've kind of changed it based off our discussion. So I appreciate that. But yeah, other than that, I think I agree with all of them.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Lima.
I'm good with this. I don't have any comments or suggestions. I like the direction it takes.
Okay, Mrs. Shockley.
Having been on boards where they've sat all day coming up with a mission statement, I think this is clear and concise, and I think it's very well done.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ludwig.
Thank you for the updated draft. I would like to see what the public has to say. So now that this has been updated, maybe we can ask for some feedback from the residents as well. So whether that's in discussion or posting on our Facebook pages, whatever that is, maybe we can bring a little feedback next session.
Okay, thank you. The mission and vision values, as Mrs. Shockley mentioned, we could sit for days and weeks to come up with just the right wording. This is really a work in progress. And probably what would be good is once we develop our strategic plan and our goals, we would look back at the mission and vision to say, is everything in alignment? So it's good to go back and forth, to start with mission and vision, go to strategic goals. And then once you develop those, go back and see if everything meshes together. Ms. Lima.
If possible, I'd like to see if we can do some temporary landing pages for the strategic plan input and the APRA funds input ahead of the meetings where we're going to discuss them. Maybe it's doing the red banner across the top that just says, here's where you can see these pages, and then put a call to action that says you can email your suggestions or feedback to this. And I think you can set it up where when people click that link, it automatically puts in the subject line, whether it's strategic plan or the COVID funds. I think if we provide a really clear way for people to provide that feedback digitally, instead of just putting the onus to come to the meeting and wait for public comment, that probably makes sense if it's easy and doable.
Thank you. Mr. Marchand, would you please look into that recommendation for us?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay. Moving on. The next agenda item is E4, discussion and possible action on the Coventry Building Committee presentation and recommendation that the town council refer a school bond of $89 million to a public vote bond referendum. Just want to mention to the council, to the members of the public, that council is not voting on a school bond this evening. I think most of us received calls during the week. People believe, based on the agenda item, that we were going to be voting this evening. We are not voting. This evening we'll be voting, hopefully December 20th. We do have a suggestion as to what kinds of things or kinds of information that the council will need in order to make a decision. So, Mr. Marchand, I'd like you to speak to what kinds of information we will be able to expect at our next meeting.
Certainly. The plan now is that the town council has received this presentation from the Coventry Building Committee with their requests and recommendations. And I propose that now I will sit down and work with a finance director to come up with some financing and funding alternatives and do a financial analysis of what this specific proposal represents. And I'm looking for any direction or input or guidance from the town council that you may also want us to look at specifically tonight.
Okay, and when those financial scenarios are developed, we would like to see them at the meeting on December 13th. And that way there could be another discussion by members of the council and the public who is here on these scenarios. And then they would, the council members would have time to digest this information and be prepared to vote on the 20th. So we're looking for any kind of information, financial information, for December 13th. Any other comments that members of the council would like to ask? Mr. LeBlanc.
I don't have any questions to ask. I just have some comments. I don't know if there's another individual that loves financial statements like I do, but the town's financial statements are available. And people can review them. And one thing on page 13 out of 159, what you'll see is that the town's assets is $161 million. That's like cash and accounts receivable. Okay. And then liabilities, which is like debt and pension debt and all that, all those liabilities, is $278 million. So before this school bond, we are already in a net position of negative $117 million. That is a lot of money. And the details behind the liabilities is this. The police pension, $66 million is what our liability is. The teachers' pension plan, $19 million, plus another $63 million. The municipal employees is $16 million. That's all liability. It's all debt that we owe, that we have to pay as taxpayers. So before we even consider $89 million, we also have bonds and notes that we owe on of $42 million, other post-employment benefits of $27 million. I mean, I can go on. $278 million of liabilities and only $161 million of assets. So we've been focusing a lot on this spreadsheet of, hey, if we can get 3% for the next 25 years, we'll be okay. We have so much debt currently that we need to focus on. This strategic plan that we just talked about, all of that costs money. So if we're going to spend 97% of our credit on a school bond, I don't know how else we're going to pay our current debts and also make improvements that this town needs in so many other areas. I really hope that people look at our current financial statements. Again, page 13 out of 159, you can see our balance sheet, and page 16 out of 49, you can see all the details that I just laid out for you. Just wanted to make that comment because I am getting calls. I can probably count on the number on my hand, the number of people who are voting for or asking me to vote for, and I can't count the number of people who have reached out to me saying, please, we cannot afford it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. Mrs. Lima.
No questions, but just a couple of comments this evening. I think overall, I don't know that I need to see any more different versions of how the numbers are crunched for this bond. Mrs. Mills and the school building committee have showed us multiple different financing scenarios, and the main theme of them all is they're completely precarious situations that require so many things to go right at the outset and every single year in order for us to be able to afford the debt payments for the next 25 years. So that's a concern to me that all the financing options are not coming up even anywhere close to roses. I want it noted that members of this town council requested to collaborate and compromise on options for a lower bond amount that maybe the town could more feasibly financially afford. And it was met with the school building committee almost unanimously voting no, that it's 89 million or bust. So there was an effort to bring the bond amount down to try and find something that we could more comfortably afford or something we closer could afford. And the school building committee said, no, it's 89 million and that's it. The chair of the committee, of the school building committee, Mr. Murray, keeps stating things like this council approved this council approved that with relation to this project. 4 out of the 5 council members here tonight were not involved in any of those agenda items where they were talking about moving forward with a school bond. It was merely in relation to approving moving forward with the project. It's concerning to me that there was never a discussion or a public discussion about what the town could actually afford before moving forward with the project. So it's the equivalent of looking to buy a home and then choosing to buy a home and then later after the fact realizing, oh, I can't afford this mortgage payment. It just felt a little backwards to me, and it's backed this town council into a really awful position in that respect. I want to echo the sentiments of Mr. LeBlanc in about committing almost 100% of our debt capital to this one particular project when we're working on a strategic plan now for the next 5, 10, 15 comprehensive plan on top of that. And so what's going to happen is if we approve this bond, we're going to have all these fancy strategic plans and we're going to have no money to spend on any of them. So we're going to strategic plan for the sake of strategic planning and not be able to act on any of it. I'd also like to see us think about a more comprehensive strategy to address the needs of all of the schools. If we're going to be using a significant amount of our debt capital, I find it hard to believe that of all the other schools that we have in the district, aside from the middle school, that for the next 25 years, for the next quarter of a century, that none of those other schools are going to need significant rehabilitation. A coat of paint and new ceiling is not going to hold over these middle schools built, these elementary schools that were built in the 70s. So that's something I think we need to think about. Is a comprehensive strategy that can address and give a 5-star educational experience from kindergarten to grade 12. So that's something else that's been on my mind. I want to think about the impact on the taxpayers as well. We're in a time of hyperinflation. The cost of things are rising. Supply and demand is an issue. So we're to talk about the fact that in order to make these bond payments, we're hearing from our town treasurer that a 3% increase on the tax levy every year is needed in order to meet these bond payments. So that's a heavy burden to ask for taxpayers. And we also have to count on the taxpayers to vote for that increase every year for 25 years. This is all, of course, on top of the fire tax, our utilities, our mortgage or rent payments. Who knows where hyperinflation is going to go? Maybe sewer assessments may be coming down the pike. We don't know what other expenses, and we have to think about the burden that would fall on the taxpayers. We also, and I brought this up at the meeting last week, I have concerns about the school is saying that they could take a 3% or lower not levy increase, but budget increase every year to help make this work. But we have on the record administration from the school department saying that they absolutely need a 4% increase every year to stay away from the potential of operating in deficit spending. So I need some clarification on that point that was raised back in April of this year when we were talking about the budget and how they would need at the max 4% increase every single year. And I think we'd need some reassurances that they could keep to what they had stated in the meeting of 3% or less to be able to stay in line with the budget that we need. I won't reiterate the financial obligations and the debt that Mr. LeBlanc already mentioned. We've already talked about the other priorities that we need to consider. We just talked about them a moment ago. Lastly, I'll just say this. We have the opportunity here to break free from the mold of Coventry's past of thinking just right in front of our noses. We have the opportunity to think strategically and think smartly and think about how we can use our money the most wisely and the most judiciously. I dream of a day where Coventry can be like some other communities, where we'll be able to say, that we can confidently not have to ask for a tax increase for so many years. There are communities, for example, like Cranston, they haven't had to do a tax increase in 6 of the last 8 years. And they're able to afford new school after new school right now. They just approved a over $130 million bond. They're getting a new elementary school in Garden City. They're getting a new elementary school after this, George Peters, in the eastern side of the city. And they haven't had to ask for a tax increase. They don't have to push that burden onto their taxpayers. I would love us to get to that point. I do look forward to hearing the conversation of my colleagues up here, because I think a lot of this bond conversation so far, we've been talked at by so many parties that we haven't gotten to discuss this with each other. So I look forward to that. And I just want to end with this. I did, and as I've explained to those that I had conversations with on the phone that called me about this issue, I did tour Coventry High School, I did tour Tyoke School, and I did tour Feinstein Middle School. I left Feinstein Middle School on the verge of tears because I don't think anyone at this table can doubt the need, especially at that middle school. That is appalling and that is shameful. And that's on the responsibility of so many in this town that it's gotten that bad. That's on the condition for the health and safety of our students, our staff, our faculty, and parents and families that utilize that building on a daily basis. We should be ashamed of the condition of that building. So regardless of how this all plays out, we need to find ways to tackle that more immediately, because we can't wait. But we also can't cut off our nose to spite our face. And it's time we start having conversations and we continue the work we're doing of strategic planning. So I look forward to hearing the rest of the comments, and I appreciate you indulging me in a little bit longer of comments, but this is a really, really important issue. So thank you.
Mrs. Shockley.
So I wish I could say that I found this to be an easy topic. There are so many different areas of our town where we have underfunded ourselves for years. One large difference between the town of Coventry and the town of Cranston is that Cranston can make a 5-year plan. They know what their levies can be year upon year upon year. So it's very hard to equate us to a city or even a town that is able to control its own budget expenditures without voter approval. I will say assets versus liabilities is a hard way to look at an annual budget. Many people are probably in a negative net position when they look at their house and their car and the different debts that they have compared to their annual salary, or even to their savings. If you ask them, if you called all their notes in 1 year, that would be a very negative position for anyone, I'm sure. But that's not exactly how budgets work. You have liabilities and you pay them off over time, not based on what your revenues are for a single year. So every year we're spending about $1 million amongst 7 schools. So we're taking all of these schools and all their issues, and up until now, we've been spending about $1 million. COVID has made it so that for the past couple of years, we've been able to meet some state mandates to raise what we're spending on our schools. But by next year, we're going to have to be spending $3.5 million. I don't know how the schools are going to be able to do that through cutting things within their own lean budgets, through getting rid of staff, through levy increases. I can't say how the schools are going to be able to meet those state mandates so that we get state funding. There are just a certain level of capital improvements we have to pay for. But let's say we are paying for them. We're cutting our way to the bottom by making the budget spend more and more on capital. We're still not making any real improvements by spending these annual amounts. We're not fixing anything. We're putting some tape on things, we're putting some paint on the walls, but we're not truly fixing anything in these schools. When we had our meeting, right now is the finish line for the school building committee, even though for a lot of us, it's the starting point. We had everyone come on new since 2020. But they're coming to the end of a project that has a timeline. And we have to decide if this is the project we want to move forward with, because it will impede our ability to spend on other capital items in the town. The calls I've received are different than some of my fellow council members. I have gotten calls and emails saying, it's atrocious. It's been atrocious for 30 years. We keep moving this down the road. We're never fixing anything. Now, during the next few years, we will completely fix one school, a school that most of our students go through. My kids will be out of the middle school by the time this project would be done, so they wouldn't actually see the middle school improvements. But the town sends most of our children through a school that is not safe. It's got mold in it. It's got water issues. It's not conducive to the kids learning because they're moving from classroom to classroom. I would like to see a budget for the bond. And maybe I'm thinking of it wrong, but the way I would think of my mortgage, I want to see, how am I putting the levy aside for this project? I think I overspoke last week to say that 3% wasn't part of this levy, because it is, but there were a lot of different aspects to the chart we were using, showing every operational expense for the town and school plus this levy. So I want to see just this levy over time. How are we supporting just this bond? Is it a percentage in each of 3 years? Is it pushing it into 2 years' time, having a restricted revenue account? How are we funding this bond? Every year, our town budget is going to be a fight under our current system. Whether or not we put this bond forward, another bond forward, or we don't move forward with any bonds in the near future, every year, our budget is an issue for the town of Coventry. I would like to see us paying to actually improve something instead of paying to put some glue on it. I think the biggest thing that sticks with me time after time is that there's no question of the need. No one is questioning the fact that this middle school needs to be drastically changed. And I think it's a huge undertaking to fix this one school. And even with putting between 800,000 to 1.7 million per school for our elementary schools, we were splitting $1 million between all 7 of them up until now. We're actually going to be able to put one chunk of real money in instead of less than a couple $100,000 a year. We're also putting $7 million into our high school that improves our learning environments and makes it so that the high school retains its accreditation. The gym floor is at a place where, I know this doesn't sound like an important thing for education, but you need it for accreditation. And it's at a place where they can't redo it anymore. So that is, for me, we are at a place where we have to fix some of these buildings. And I don't disagree that there are probably options for limiting the project. The project presented to us at that school building committee meeting at that time would not have actually made the improvements necessary would have required another bond within a few years. So it's kind of the same, would they approve, won't they approve? In speaking to my fellow residents, I have in no way said school or bust, but I have said I support the school and I understand the reservations of my fellow council members. This is something that I see as important enough to move forward to the voters, to let the voters decide, is this important enough to us as residents of the town of Coventry to have this be the project that we're pushing forward with for the foreseeable future? If there's a funding plan for it, if there is a way to do it, I know it relies on those same residents to support budgets. But I think to leave it in just the five of our hands with something this important and this necessary just isn't right.
Thank you. Ms. Ludwig.
Thank you. So I have a couple comments and then a couple of possible directives for Mr. Marchant and Director Mills. So firstly, I am very concerned about the mold. I'm very concerned about the gym floor and accreditation. I'm very concerned about the state of our current schools. It's my understanding that there could be some alternatives outside of the bond should it not go forward. And so what I'd like to know is, firstly, if this option does not pass, does not move to the voters, I'd like to know, based on the information that we were provided from the school building committee, firstly, what would be the process of a possible $10 to $11 million bond to address the immediate warm, safe, dry needs of the schools while giving us a little bit of time to figure out the next best option? So that's my first request of Director Mills, please. The second request is if we do proceed with the $89 million bond options, it's my understanding that 3% is not enough. My understanding is that based off of the several presentations that have been made, that it is likely best to do bans on the bonds rather than doing one bond all up front. And the cost of that, plus what we would need as a town, considering we did no capital improvement funding last year, and some of the other items like the 3% maintenance on the school side, et cetera, what we would have to do, I'm assuming that would end up in the 5 to 6% tax increase range. And so what I'd like to know is what are the specific steps that we would have to do? What would have to happen in order for us to ask for 5 to 6%, even if some of those funds get put on reserve to pay for part of the interest on the bans before we start the major reimbursements. And then,
Just a moment.
Excuse me, did you say you wanted me to run analysis of 5 to 6% levy if that's what it takes?
yes. So for example, I want to know the steps. So what do we have to do? What do we have to ask the state legislature? I know that 4% is our cap. I am not confident based off of all the numbers that we've seen and lots of different spreadsheets. I'm not convinced that 3% is appropriate to pay for the interest that would be needed on the bans and what we have to pay up front versus the payback.
Okay. Well, I can say for certain that 3% is not going to pay the bond if we give the school appropriation the 3.3 that they're getting now. Clearly, 3% in the first analysis I did is not going to work based on the current financial situation of the school department, having a tough time managing some cash. The cash flow, I don't see going below 3.3%. So I would have to rerun and use 3.3, which is their current appropriation rate.
Okay.
Okay.
And then lastly, I know it's been mentioned a few times. I am also very concerned that with the current proposal, we would be at 90+% of our lending capacity, which means not just the items on the strategic planning that we were just talking about, but there's things that are not even on that list, such as the community center looks like it's about to fall down.
The new community center?
No, the Parks and Rec Community Center looks like it's about to fall down. There's other items such as roads and other infrastructure improvements that we wouldn't even be able to look at. That would never be less than a $10 million bond for the next 25 years. And so to spend that huge chunk on one school, I think is going to be a tough pill to swallow without having that higher percentage up front. And if that's what we decide to do, that's what we decide to do. And that's why I'm asking for the higher percentage, and also the steps that we would have to ask for the legislature to pass. And then lastly, I understand that there was a school building committee meeting 1 or 2 weeks ago where there was talk of whether or not the bond amount could be brought down from 89 down to approximately 40 million. And that was voted down. I think it was 14-1 or 15-1, where they said, no, we need to go for the full 89. And I am extremely concerned that if that is the only option, that we may not end up with anything if it doesn't make it to the voters. And so I would like to somehow have some sort of discussion with Chairman Murray and find out, even if there's, the slightest chance in hell that we can call up the director at RIDE and find out is there a possibility that we could cut out some of the nicer to have items and bring this bond amount down? Could we get it through an approval process as fast as possible? Is there any way they could prioritize for us? I think it's worth asking the question. So that's an item that I'd like us to consider having some sort of meeting with Chairman Murray offline to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. As many of you know, maybe you don't know, Mrs. Shockley and I are members of the Coventry Building Committee, and I've been on it for over 2 years. So I am familiar with the work that went into developing a project. Mrs. Shockley moved on to the committee about a year ago in November or so. And so she's had a long term, and we're both on the finance team and we're on the marketing team. So we spent a lot of time on this. But time spent is not the important factor here. What I want to mention is that I was on the school committee for 6 years. I went in every single school, every single classroom. I've shadowed students through the schools. And then as a town council member, I've been in all of the schools again. I've toured them. I've had meetings in them. And the situation is getting worse and worse year after year. And delays are not an option. So I feel that it's extremely important for us to look for what are the possibilities. Is there some way we can at least start to make some inroads on the improvements that are needed? Because the longer we wait, the worse it's going to be. And then where will we be? Maybe we would have spent some of our money on roads and bridges and other things, but the schools are still going to be falling down around us. And that is our prime asset in a community. So what I'm going to suggest is this. We have a project before us. We ask people to go out, form a team, and be a building committee and come forth with a proposal. They came forth with a proposal. So I would like Ms. Mills to do the financial scenario in a clear way so that all of us can clearly understand what the numbers mean. And also members of the public can have a clear understanding of what financing an $89 million bond actually means. But I would also like you to consider the proposal that was before the school building committee, which was not passed. And I was the one person who did not vote for the 89 million. I asked to have a slimmed down version. And a proposal was made for about 40 million, and that included doing everything that was proposed for the elementary schools. And that included replacing the well at Western Coventry. I remember the days when all of the water fountains were covered with black plastic bags because kids couldn't even drink the water in the schools, and we had to bring in bottled water. We fixed the well, but we didn't have time to or money to even replace the well. So, I mean, those are some of the big items that are on this list of things to be done. As far as the high school is concerned, if you go in the high school, I like to say that the science labs look like they come from the 50s. They wouldn't even be accepted on Antique Roadshow. They are so old and crumbling. You wouldn't even be able to lift them up and take them to Antique Roadshow and say, what is the value of this? So the science labs need to be improved. We talk about being in the 21st century, and we're not even there in the high school labs. And as was mentioned, the floor in the gym does not even meet accreditation standards. And we don't need to lose accreditation for our high school. So for about $40 million, and I know this is not the best option, for $40 million, we can do everything in the elementary schools, we can do everything in the high school, and we can do part of the middle school. Now, that does not eliminate all the mold and some of the problems that are happening in the middle school, but it removes a 3-story extension or a new part of the building, which was supposed to house the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders and provide them with the learning kind of environments that you see in all of the schools these days. So we can at least make a headway into making some improvements in the middle school. It's not the best option, is not what I would prefer to see, but I would like, Ms. Mills, for you to just run a theoretical financial scenario so that we would have a better idea of what it would mean if the voters were to approve a $40 million project. We don't actually have the project. We don't know all the details, but what it would include would be the elementary school, the high school, and part of the middle school. So I'd like you to do that scenario also. Ms. Shockley also recommended another scenario, which I think she's been asking for, I think, at every meeting that I've been to. And that is whenever we see the financial scenarios, the amount of money needed to pay for the bond and the amount of money needed to support operations for school in town are all put together. And she's asked for a scenario in which, what does it look like financially if we just look at how much the bond would cost us? And we know that there is what is called pay-go money that the state does provide. The amount of pay-go money would be less if it were a smaller amount for the bond. But I think that we really need to look at the possibilities that Mrs. Shockley has presented to us to lay out what the bond actually costs and divorce it from what we need for operations. Did I state it correctly? What you want?
So Ms. Ann, I did that. That's in that school, the impact on the school bond. There was a slide that was just the cost of the bond, excluding the exterior piece of the budget. So it was, I don't have it with me, but it was on the bond impact. Oh, wait, actually, I do have it here.
Did I miss that page?
I do have it here. Hold on.
Okay.
So yes, it's on page 5 of the October 18th presentation that myself and Mr. Marchand presented.
So here's the financial scenario for just payment for the bond. Is that correct?
Yes. And it also shows the housing aid revenue that we were receiving on top of that. So it's just standalone housing. The total housing aid would be $64,435,066. Then the new school bond debt would be $132 million with $132,217,541. So $132,217,541. So the revenue less our expenditures that we would incur would be $67,782,475 that we would have to ask from the taxpayers. $67 million.
So just to thank you for that, but I would like to see the levy required in years, starting with this fiscal year, to actually pay for that. So not just how much we would need from the taxpayers over time, but just how would we put a levy into our budget to pay for it?
So I guess it goes back down to the fundamentals of budgeting. So our revenue has to equal our expenses. So I can't extract this from there. So we'll include the revenue, which includes that 64, and include the 132 million in expenses, right? So to extract the levy that would just be for this, that's kind of not doable. Because the total expenses have to be in the budget for this bond, and the total revenue from the housing aid will be in the budget. So the net difference, you'll see that, I think in the analysis I had, I came up with a 1.99 levy for the following year because some of debt fall off. And so,
Right, but the restricted revenue account is something we've discussed. And you said that was something that could be done with tax revenues.
So if that was something that the town council would entertain, is to do additional levies before the bond is even financed for 3 straight years, and put what would be calculated as a surplus into a reserve for capital. But
For expenses we know are coming up.
Right, but it's still not going to cover the total debt.
And if it doesn't, if you have no scenario that covers the total debt, then tell us that. But if there is a scenario that we can start levying in this fiscal year.
So here's, listening to all the town council members' issues and understandings of this concern of this debt and the need for the school. Obviously, I and Mr. Marchand walked through the school ourselves, and we had the tour, and it's clearly we need a new school. That's I don't think anyone in the town is going to argue that point. Based on the financial situation, using all the debt and everything combined, I think it's a tough sell.
100%, Lisa.
Yes.
What I want you to do is show me.
Are you from Missouri?
I'm saying I want you to show me.
Yeah.
And if the 5 of us look at it and say, well, that's insane, then it is. If we look at it and say it's worth putting it in front of the taxpayers, then it is. But I don't want you to tell me it's insane. I want you to show it to me.
Yeah, I thought I did on some of these presentations, but I can, what I can do is some more analysis, and I'll do some summaries. And maybe I can put it in a little bit clearer terms, but the most concerning thing to me as a finance person is using up all your credit. Okay. And I can't recall who said, if we do this whole strategic plan is all for nothing, because you will literally have nothing.
So I 100% agree with you on that too. I still want you to show me.
Right. I'm just going to say one thing.
Mr. Marchand does have a comment. So let's pause a moment.
Yep. I just want to add one more thing. The biggest concern to me is we have to, and someone made this point tonight, we have to get this budget passed by the taxpayers every year at the minimum 299. That's my biggest concern.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Marchand.
So this is the conversation that is leading us to prepare the financial analysis. And thank you for your requests for information. Even if it's something we've already presented in the past, we'll bring it back so that we can have exactly a crystal clear focus on just our financing alternatives and the impacts that we can anticipate, so that we're having a standalone discussion. I think our previous presentations were in a different context, looking at a number of variables based on different presentations and understandings of it. I think what we have now is a directive from the town council to show the options and what that looks like.
Correct. So we have a project before us. It's 89 million. We want to see the financial scenarios. clearly presented. You've done an excellent job. You're a finance director. We would expect A to Z columns, but maybe we need a few less columns so that people can easily follow the information and clearly understand. When we started this discussion, many of us did not understand even what debt fall off was or is. Mr. LeBlanc probably did. I'm sure he did. But some of the rest of us are learning new financial terms.
I think most of us know what that is. I'm just going to say that I do, and I think that most people do.
Thank you. Well, from having come from a family in which my father would never take out a loan, and we either paid for something that we had the money or we didn't. We never even discussed debt, but nevertheless. But thank you for that comment. All of you understood those terms. Okay, excellent. Okay, what we want is a scenario for what was presented to us. We don't have a project for 40 million. There was a suggestion of what it would look like. That project has not been approved by RIGL. We don't even know if it would be approved, but we'd like to see what that scenario would look like. That might be something that is feasible. Don't know whether that's feasible or not. And then Mrs. Shockley has presented her request for presentation of the data. So is there anything else you would like? Mrs. Lima?
I just wanted to state that where possible, that doesn't violate OMA laws. I want to be brought into the fold on any discussions about reduced bond amounts, like one that you've mentioned. And I think Councillor Ludwig has mentioned restarting those conversations. So if those do happen, and I hope that those discussions are active again and taken seriously, I would like to be brought in the fold and part of those discussions actively. So if that could just be taken into consideration when those are planned, I would appreciate it.
Certainly. That discussion took place in a public meeting, and the Coventry Building Committee was a public meeting.
I understand, but it sounds like we're doing it again and we're going to try and push it again. So if those happen again, maybe if it's a one-on-one way with Mr. Murray, then a smaller audience before going back to the school building committee again, I'd like to be involved in that conversation.
Fine. Thank you. So the question is just to see what it would look like, but we don't have a project before us, and it's not been approved by RIGL. So it may be a moot point. We do not know, but we want to get the scenarios for it. Any other final comments, Mr. LeBlanc?
Maybe for next meeting. When it comes down to the bond interest, it's been stated before that if this bond was to pass, we would use the interest expense as maintenance towards that $3.5 million that Member Shockley brought up on an annual basis. I believe one reason why we got to the place where we currently are with all of our town's buildings, especially the schools, I believe it was last year, we were the only town out of 39 that did not meet our maintenance requirement, meaning that the school committee did not budget and did not pay for maintenance that they were required to spend. So I don't understand why we would then decide to use bond interest towards that maintenance requirement. Because if you're using the bond interest towards maintenance, you're actually not doing maintenance. And we have a lot of other schools in town that need maintenance. Actually, we have a Jacobs report that says tens of millions of dollars, however you want to divide it up. So if we're going to use that interest as maintenance, how are we repairing the other schools?
In the first 3 years, we're putting the whole project should get done in about 3 years. Mm-hmm. So we're putting all of that maintenance into the school during that initial time period. I agree. I'm concerned. Right. We're putting 800,000 to 1.7 million into each of these elementary schools during the first couple of years. We're putting the money into the high school. We're rebuilding
first couple of years, but
the middle school.
We are required to spend maintenance for the 25 years that we've been paying this bond off.
Most definitely. And part of the conversation has been, we also need to see a ramp up of what is being spent on school maintenance over time. Mm-hmm. Everything is
completely agree.
So I agree with you that has to get done over time. Mm-hmm. In the first 3 years, we're going to put more money into each of the elementary schools than we normally would have in 4 or 5.
Understood. And my final comment is I know we're asking for a spreadsheet essentially that can come up with some budgeted rate that's going to make this possible. But it goes back to what the finance director said. Ultimately, it goes up to the taxpayer. And if we're going to look at history, we know that there's level funded budgets. We know that there's 2% budgets that have been passed, right? If you go back to the May 8th meeting minutes, superintendent stated that a 2% budget will be devastating. If you go back to the April 12th minutes, a level funded budget. He reminded any funds that they use to keep filling their structural deficit is going to be devastating. So this spreadsheet can come up and it can show 3.9% and make it all possible. But we also know that budgets sometimes fail, and we do level funded budgets. I don't honestly need any more information. I don't believe it's feasible to expect the bond to get passed, and that when the taxpayers vote on this bond, that they know for the next 25 years that they have to approve a 3.9% increase every single year. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And that's why I go back to my comment that this bond should be voted on at the exact same time as the budget, at least for 1 year that it actually happens.
But I'll also say we have bonds within our budget right now. And as long as we've put the funding in for those bonds, we're not putting the funding in for those bonds over 25 years. We're putting the funding in for the bonds under scenarios that Lisa shows. But the rest of those 25 years after, my win would be that we could put the full levy for the bond in with the bond. That would be the best case scenario, but I don't think it's possible. Going over the 4% budget is something that you can do if you get legislative approval. So seeing that may take care of that.
But you still need the taxpayers
scenario.
to approve it.
100%, but in 1 year. Like you said, if we're increasing it over 4%, they'd be approving the budget in the same year they're approving the bond. 100% the best case scenario. But even if it's over a few years that we're putting a levy in specifically for the bond, once you're paying for it, our other increases aren't that bond, because that's staying the same, principal and interest, once we've passed the bans and are paying the principal and interest. That's the same every year within our budget. That's not increasing because of inflation. It's not increasing because we need more staff or more trucks or more of something else. That's just a solid part of our budget year after year after year. So it's not that we're increasing it every year because of that bond. The bond is just part of the budget after the levies increases that are required. And that's at least how I understand it.
Would you like me to expand on that?
Certainly.
Most definitely.
So that would be the case if the highest interest and principal payment was in the first year. And you could, I know people call it's in the base and you don't have to keep reoccurring, but it's not. And it's not the first three years are interest only. And hold on, let me get to page 5.
So if we can't do a restricted revenue account, please let me know that, because my hypotheses are including a restricted revenue account from year 1.
So you can. It's not really called a restricted revenue, but terminology.
Sure.
So would it just be a reserve? So what the town council would budget for is this: when they budget for their revenues and their expenditures, they would, on the expenditure side, have a reserve for CIP. And they would budget X amount. Okay. So, and that would have to be built into the levy, and that would have to be done every year. But in 2026 is where it's a little bit concerning, because that's the first principal and interest payment. And that's $6.8 million just for the school.
So Director Mills, this is basically what I was requesting earlier, which is why my hypothesis is that the 3% is likely not high enough. So we'd have to go to 5 or 6% up front, put some of that in reserve so that we could pay for more later. So I think I'm also asking for the same thing as Councillor Shockley, to say, what would we need to do up front? Even if it's at that 5 or 6%, put those funds in reserve, and let's see what that example looks like at the 89.
So
Can you do
okay,
that?
So
Can you do that, Ms. Mills?
I don't believe I can, Miss Ann, because you have to have a bond to go over the 4% cap. It has to go over the 4% cap on the levy. It has to be debt related. And at that point in time, we will not secure the debt until 2026.
So if that's the case, I'd just like to confirm that. This has been the same question I've been asking since we started talking about this project.
Maybe,
which
can you
is,
expand on that, Mr. Dave D'Agostino, about the 4% levy?
So I think what the issue is that under Rhode Island General Laws 4452, which is the maximum levy statute, there are 4 scenarios whereby any municipality can exceed the 4% cap. And those 4 scenarios are very specific. It requires the approval of the Office of Municipal Finance to exceed that 4% levy cap. I don't think, based on what I'm hearing, I don't think the town would meet any of the 4 exemptions to exceed that cap that are stated in the statute. And I think that's what Director Mills is saying is part of the issue with what she's just describing about front loading that piece. The tax cap statute is such a key legislative it's been such a key piece of legislation for many, many years, ostensibly designed to keep property taxes low. There could be a scenario where we have a financial town meeting, the voters were to approve a levy that exceeded the cap, and the state could say, we don't authorize you to exceed the cap. That is a real life scenario. I don't know how likely that would be, but that's one of the scenarios. And so I think what's constraining the conversation, and perhaps what's constraining the fiscal analyses here, is that tax cap statute.
so I will say, I've been asking this question since we started working on this project. And this project has been so siloed where different groups of 4 get together to talk about this project. And multiple people have asked this question. I know Mr. Murray has asked this question. No solid answer has ever been provided. And that is extremely frustrating as we're getting to a place where we're trying to make a decision to put an $89 million bond in front of the voters. So I'm very frustrated on the part of the school building committee, on the part of this town, that we have not been able to work together in any way as we are trying to move forward on this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Mills, you've got a lot of feedback this evening, a lot of potential scenarios we're looking for. We're looking for them on December 13th. In some kind of clear, easy to understand way for all the members of the council and also the members of the public, so that when we have to make a decision, or we do make a decision on December 20th, we will be able to make it knowing that we have been provided with all the information we needed to make a reasonable decision as to what we do regarding this bond. But I think you do know we need a couple of scenarios relating to different sizes of the bonds.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
And we need to have Mrs. Shockley's questions answered. Mhm. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Ready to move forward? Okay. Well, we've had an exciting meeting this evening. Lots of discussion, that's for sure. We're now at agenda item F, public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to raise your hand, be recognized, and come to the podium and state your name and address. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak? Also, we also this opportunity to members who are on Zoom. So if you'd like to just raise your hand, we'll call on you and let you in one at a time. Is there any member of the public who would like to make a statement? State your name and address, please.
Mark Lemoy, 34 Island Drive. I'm the president of the Johnson Pond Civic Association. On behalf of the Civic Association members, myself, I'd like to thank the council for bringing forth that resolution to assist DEM and to petition the state legislature and House to appropriate some funding to help DEM in their mission to protect the environment and to protect the recreational facilities of Johnson's Pond. I'd also like to thank the town solicitor, the town manager. You've all been very supportive throughout this, and you know, it was said that, you know, this past year or so has been very trying and disturbing. And we want to, as the association, assist the town council and DEM in any way we can with any information. We have a lot of history on water levels, river flows that we can produce, a lot of knowledgeable people on the subject. Senator Raptakis is here tonight, and he has been very proactive on this subject. And I would also like to ask the council to support legislation he is proposing in the House. He can explain what the legislation is further.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemoy. Senator Raptakis?
Leonidas Raptakis, 288 Newsnack Hill Road. Thank you, Madam President, members of the Town Council. As Mark Lemoy had stated, I had read the agenda item for tonight, and Ledge Council already drafted a rough draft. I was going to pass it out earlier, but again, you were in executive session, but I'll hand it out to you. So it's a working draft, and I would ask that the town solicitor review the draft, add any additional language that you see fit, and appropriately, that will be one piece of legislation that the delegation will put forth. Now, the issue is getting that money appropriated by the General Assembly is the big question. But since Quidnick Reservoir was created by the General Assembly, so has a very good relationship between the state and the community. So if something that was created by the General Assembly, then the General Assembly would act on behalf to either assist the town in this resolution. And that brings me to the second scenario, that we also have legislation that's going to be pending. And again, we'd like to work with the town solicitor while we're drafting the bills. I know one of the bills is S986 from last year, which gives DEM the authority to look at the levels of, give the right to DEM to either raise the levels of the water, keep the water levels throughout the seasonal period of the time or during an emergency. But there'll be a second bill that's going to give the town of Coventry that authority. So those are going to be probably three bills total, the one resolution, and then one instance where DEM has the authority. And then the second one would be up to this body to look at both pieces of legislation with your approval, give us again a resolution supporting either of the other two bills, or maybe one of the two might go forth. But I think it's very important to work with the town solicitor. I know James Higgins has been in conversation with your town solicitor, Nick Gorham, and we want to craft something that's going to be suited for the town of Coventry. And again, it has to go through the process. A House version will be introduced, a Senate version will be introduced with your passage of a resolution, and then there'll be public testimony up at the General Assembly, both pro and con on both bills. We get the support from the community, support from the Johnson's Pond Association. So that's the process that we're going to look at. So I think it's going to be a very good scenario. I like to see what's happened the last year is not very acceptable to myself, being a Coventry resident and knowing that Johnson's Pond has been part of this community for over 100 years for a lot of members of this town. And that's part of my testimony tonight on the Johnson's Pond. The other thing I want to bring up, I was listening earlier in the discussion regarding the body cameras. The town of Coventry has the opportunity, the General Assembly did pass enabling legislation, which the governor signed on July 8th of this year, to enable cities and towns to have or outfit every member of the police department with body cameras. There's no cost to the town. As long as the town meets the guidelines of the rules and regulations set forth by the Attorney General. We've given the Attorney General that authority. So if the police chief sits down with the Attorney General and they agree upon the rules and regulations that these body cameras will be used, there is zero cost to the town of Coventry. So that will not be part of your cost. I think there's only 2 other cities and towns that already have gone forth 2 years ago, Narragansett, and I think the city of Providence went forth and paid for the body cameras out of their budget. But this is something that's not a mandate, it's enabling legislation. So I just wanted to put that forth for your point of information for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. And we hope that you will help the delegation to support this resolution that we're sending to DEM.
Oh, absolutely. I've already got a copy of the draft for you, and I can hand that out to you later on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public who'd like to make a comment this evening? Is there anyone on Zoom? We have one hand up. Please bring that person in. Good evening. Ms. Landry, hello. Please state your name and address, please.
Sure, it's Carrie Landry, 21 Circlewood Drive, Coventry. Hi, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for discussing the school building committee's proposal for building the schools. That's mostly what I wanted to talk about, was like building a new middle school and renovating the other schools that are in town. So I have a lot of questions maybe about this. I'm hoping that maybe, like through you discussing, like how to come up with funding and whatnot for this, we can also consider the fact that the state of Rhode Island, RIDE, is going to be reimbursing a big portion of this project of the bond. And I didn't hear you guys bring that up in your discussions at all. So I'm a little curious about that. I'm not an expert by any means. I don't want to pretend I'm an expert, but my understanding is that RIDE is going to be reimbursing up to 7% of this project. And it'll be, we'll get that reimbursement at the conclusion when it's built. And it sounds like it'll take a couple of years to do that for the middle school and for the renovations in the other buildings. But again, so when we take out like that $80 million loan, really, it's not $80 million. Like, this is my perspective anyway. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's not $80 million altogether, because really RIDE is reimbursing 57% of that. So it's a much smaller amount. And for the first few years, I think we probably, and I'm not an expert, like I said, but maybe we have to pay the interest on that 80 million until RIDE reimburses us a portion, and then it's principal and interest. But again, I guess what I'm asking is, I didn't hear you guys mention that reimbursement. So if somebody could speak to that, that would be appreciated.
Sure.
Well, thank you. We did, Ms. Mills can address it, but we actually did speak on the phone, I think Sunday morning when you called me. And
Yes.
I mentioned to you that the reimbursement does not begin until the project is completed. That will be the end of 2025. And the reimbursement is not a lump sum. It comes over a period of 25 years. So it's not that the town is going to receive all this money and can immediately pay off a bond. It's going to come in a little at a time, proportionate for 25 years, and we can use it to pay for the interest on the bond, but not the principal. Is that correct, Ms. Mills?
Yeah, I mean, we can, what you say, just it pays for just interest, but it's not really allocated as such. But so to further expand on Ms. Carey's question, the 64 million will come in over the like Miss Ann had stated, over the life of the bond, once the bond is financed and the project is complete, which would be estimated in 2026. But the interest on 80 million, interest in principal over the term is 132 million. So when we subtract the two, the net cost to the taxpayer is 67. So we are getting 64 million from the state, but we're paying a pretty heavy, obviously, borrowing 80 million is a huge interest payment there.
And Ms. Landry, just to make it more clear, Ms. Mills is factoring in to her numbers that reimbursement. So she's using that when she gives us our numbers.
Okay, thank you. And the only other thing I want to say is I did hear a few of you mention how you've toured the schools yourselves and you've seen firsthand, the deplorable conditions really that the middle school is in particular. And if and I don't know what a $40 million proposal looks like, but it sounded like a lot of the money was going to be dispersed to the elementary and high school based on the conversation that you guys just had, and a portion of it would go to the middle school. But out of that portion, I don't know if that would be enough to truly fix and mitigate the issues that are at the middle school. I mean, you walk through the building and you see, mold on the flag, maybe mold on chairs, mold on the walls. You see, water dripping from the ceiling. You see all sorts of things. But what you don't see is, day to day, like other things that, maybe happen like during the winter when the pipes burst because it's cold and the heating system's antiquated. I can't talk, sorry. Things like that. Also, mold inside of the walls, is greatly concerning because the roof has been patched over time, and things aren't necessarily done correctly. I'm not an expert, like I said. I'm just speaking as a parent in the community. I do also teach at the middle school, so I do have a vested interest in this, but I've been there 21 years at the middle school, and I can tell you I've taught in multiple classrooms in that building, 15 different classrooms to be precise. So I am well aware of the issues that are at the middle school, and I am very passionate about that. I don't think the community is aware of the issues that are plaguing our schools. COVID doesn't help. We aren't able to have parents come in and members from the community come in necessarily because of COVID safety protocols. So I think that, if it's unseen, people forget about it, or if they just didn't see it to begin with. Like we have I was telling Ann, we have a lot of new families that moved into the district. A lot of those families, the parents have not had an opportunity to go into the schools yet. Open house was virtual. That was a great opportunity for parents to go in and see the building, meet and greets and things like that. So everything's been virtual. So I guess I know there's a lot to consider. I know there's a lot on the table here. I just wanted to kind of put my perspective in, and if I can help in any way, I know I've already said that to Ann, I'd be, more than happy to help.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Landry. All right, any other members of the public on Zoom who would like to speak? Any other members of the public who are here? Mrs. Murray.
Hi, Claire Murray, 2 Doolittle Street.
Speak into the microphone, please. Thank you.
Sorry, is it on? I look at this as a community of a town who supports both the municipal and the school side. I'm also a person who knows that there are so many needs. The one thing I will say is without a good school system, you have nothing. If we want to be a bedroom community and we want to are willing to pay those high taxes and not have a decent school, then that's fine. My biggest concern is the middle school. First of all, I go to the school committee meetings. I've been following the building committee. I come to the town council meetings. It's been almost 3 years bringing this to fruition. I don't see it coming to fruition based on the history of this town. But what will happen is, if it doesn't go to the voters, or if it's voted down and it's looked at again, and we look at a $40 million project, you have to start from scratch. You have to go to RIGL, you have to put in all those applications, you have to pay that $150,000 fee. You have to have people who are willing to do this committee, and then again, go out to bond and find out. In the meantime, 2 years or more go by and we keep doing the Band-Aid. I was a nurse for 50 years. It's my understanding, I get that there's a separate school budget, a separate town budget, but the school is a town building, correct?
Correct.
Is that correct, Mr. Marcia? The school, okay. You are worried about fixing a town hall and leaving a middle school full of mold. Would any of you wax your floor, scrape up the mold, and then wax your floor so that it wouldn't come up? Have any of you ever gone to the CDC and looked at the repercussions of mold, not just short term, long term? Have any of you ever looked at the equipment that is supposed to be used to mitigate the mold? The respirator masks, the boots, the masks, the gloves. I don't think that there's an appreciation in this town for how bad mold in that school is. For not just short term, the asthmatics and those kids who have trouble. And that $40,000 or $1 million that you say isn't going to mitigate the mold, but it'll give them some nice classrooms. But what are we doing? We're doing a halfway measure. Either do it or don't do it. Either we commit to the whole town or we don't. Either we support I don't have any children in the school system. I have one grandchild and the other one isn't. And I'd be more than happy to support them going outside of the school district. And we are bleeding students to other communities. And we're paying for all these communities, including Cranston, including all these other communities that are getting their school bonds passed. We already are paying those taxes when we approved that years ago. I'm not going to convince any voter here to vote for the bond. I think we have a great town. I think we have a good DPW. I think we have a good police department. I think our human resources is incredible. But I embrace the whole town and I embrace our children. And I want to see the schools be considered part of the town. But whether it's voted on, whether it's sent to the voter or not, I feel we owe a debt to that middle school to get rid of the mold. If we're not going to really fix it and do something, then we need to take care of our town buildings. Never mind trying to save the police department and these other buildings. We need to focus on getting the mold out of this school and protecting our best and brightest assets, our children and the teachers and the administration, all the people that work there. If any of you had ever done any kind of health care and could see what mold does and what it can do to you long term as well as short term, you might have a different view. But at least if you're not going to put it out to bond, or the townspeople aren't going to vote on it, do something with your building. Get rid of the mold. I'm done.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Mr. Williams?
Question, not make any sense.
Okay, wait till you get to the microphone. State your name and address, please.
Richard Williams at 2980 Flat River Road. I have a question. They said they wanted to do the town hall and take the places, the building committee, and everything from away from their school across the street and bring it over here. What are they going to do with the school then over there? Isn't that basically empty? How much would it cost to fix that school and move the middle school there? Has anybody researched that? No, I just have a question. That's all it is. It's just a question and a statement. Because there's an empty building over there, basically. I know the police have something in there, and the school the school department has something in there. But basically it was a school. I know it needs some work. But it would be cheaper to fix that and move the middle school into that building and do away with the middle school. Just a comment, because I know they said they were going to move some of the town things that are in the annex back here if they do redo the town. That's all I wanted to say.
Mr. Williams, thank you for your comment. There's been a lot of conversation relating to some of the items that you've discussed, but we really have not had any kind of discussion at the town council level about any of the items that you have mentioned, but we'll certainly take that into consideration. But we don't have an answer for that question because there hasn't been a discussion here.
I didn't think it.
Study.
I didn't think it was. I was just curious.
One more comment because I've now heard two people say that the council has talked about redoing town hall. I want to be very clear that, to my recollection, actually two of us specifically said, take that out of tier 1 on the priorities. I don't even know exactly what this would mean. So whatever miscommunication was about redoing town hall, there is no request on the table to redo town hall.
That was in his tier 1. I was just quoting what the manager said.
Right. So in tier 1, we asked, I believe, at least two of us did, for more information on what did that mean. And it was briefly mentioned at the strategic session, which I know you joined us for, which my understanding was possibly some movement within the town hall, but not a
It's not a plan.
It's not a plan. It's not a renovation. It's not,
Concept space.
Yes, exactly. So I just want to be clear that no one here tonight has suggested that we are redoing town hall.
No, I know. It's just been just a discussion. That's all it's been. I know that. But I just wanted to throw that out there about that building over there too.
Well, thank you for bringing it up. We know that sometimes ideas get out there, rumors start flying, and then people start to believe that rumors are fact. And we just want to say that it is not a fact.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments by members of the public? May I have a motion to adjourn, please? At, what time is it? 9:47?
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second.
May I have a second? Thank you. Roll call. Mr. Shockley?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickson? Yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.